Welcome, friends. Today I'm going to tell you a heartwarming story about how a simple act of kindness changes lives. Enjoy the story. Sarah Williams wiped the sweat from her brow as she finished arranging the last of the milk bottles on her makeshift stand. At 38, the years of toil on Greenfield Farm had taken their toll, etching lines of weariness on her once youthful face. She sighed, remembering better days before the bosses stopped paying salaries, forcing the workers to hawk their meager goods by the roadside to make ends meet. Looking around, Sarah saw she had arrived late. The prime spots near the road were already taken by her fellow villagers. She needed a good day of sales to afford the roof repairs on her dilapidated house. Her handy neighbor Jack had agreed to patch the leaks, but she still had to pay for materials and some of his time. "Lord, please let me sell it all today," Sarah prayed under her breath. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah watched enviously as customers from passing buses and cars flocked to the stalls up front. An hour dragged by. The stream of buyers slowed to a trickle, then stopped. Two near-empty buses remained, disgorging a smattering of passengers. Sarah managed to flag down a few cars, smiling gratefully as they pulled over to purchase her dairy items. "Half gone, half to go," she tallied. If she could just sell the rest, she calculated she'd have enough to buy Jack's supplies and get him started in a couple days. The scene seemed frozen in the midday heat when a bus pulled in. A young boy, no more than 12 or 13, leaped out and rushed to the driver. Sarah watched as they engaged in an animated discussion, the boy gesticulating pleadingly while the driver shook his head adamantly. Eventually, the driver closed the doors, and the bus pulled away, leaving the dejected boy sitting on the curb, head in his hands. "Poor little fella," Sarah thought, recognizing him as a lad from the village a few miles down the road. She and Minnie Johnson were the only vendors left, Minnie loudly hawking her scandalous tabloids to anyone within earshot. As the afternoon pressed on, Sarah felt a tug of concern for the boy. Making a decision, she grabbed a bottle of milk and a packet of cheese pancakes from her stand. Approaching slowly, she held out the items with a kind smile. "Here, sweetie. You look hungry." The boy looked up startled. Suspicion battled with the hollow look of hunger in his eyes. Hesitantly, he reached out and took the food, mumbling a shy, "Thank you, ma'am." "What's your name, son? And what are you doing out here all alone?" Sarah asked gently, lowering herself to sit beside him. Between mouthfuls, the boy told his story. His name was Danny Greer, and he was trying to get to his daddy's house. His parents had split up last year, and his mama moved them in with her relatives in the village. Things were all right at first, but then the relatives started drinking, arguing, even hitting him sometimes. He had hid in the shed all night, scared to go inside. This morning, he decided to go to his daddy's. "I tried to get on the bus, asked a couple of drivers real nice, but they won't let me ride without no money. I know the way, though. Get to the station at the end of the line, then go left across the highway." Sarah's heart ached for the young boy. She only had $30 from today's sales, barely enough for her roof, but she couldn't bear the thought of this child hitchhiking along the open road. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a crisp $20 bill, the price of a ticket to the end of the line. Danny's eyes widened as she pressed the money into his hand. "Here, honey. You get yourself home to your daddy safe now, you hear?" Overwhelmed, Danny threw his arms around Sarah in a quick, fierce hug. Spotting the final bus of the day pulling in, he jumped up and sprinted toward it, calling, "Thank you," over his shoulder. As the bus merged onto the highway, a small hand thrust out a window, waving wildly. "I'm Danny. What's your name?" "Sarah," she called, waving back. "Sarah Williams." "I won't forget, Miss Sarah. I'll see you again, I promise." With that, the bus disappeared around the bend, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and a few unsold dairy items. "Lord, let that child make it home safe," she prayed as she packed up her stand for the long walk home. Little did she know how a simple act of kindness would shape her future. The years hadn't been kind to Sarah Williams. At 53, her weathered face and calloused hands told the story of a life of unceasing labor. She stood now, back straight with righteous anger, glaring at the man behind the desk. "Michael, please, I've worked on Greenfield Farm for 35 years, never missed a day. Always did my part. Can't you do something to help? Put in a word with the owner?" Sarah's voice shook with barely contained frustration. Michael Torrance, the farm's recently appointed manager, leaned back in his leather chair, an infuriatingly smug smile playing across his lips. Sarah, times have changed. It's all about market forces now. Bottom line is nothing's free. You want something, you've got to have something to trade. And to be frank, what exactly are you offering?" Sarah slammed her fist on the desk, a lifetime of swallowed pride bubbling to the surface. "How about loyalty, Michael? Dedication? I've given my life to this place, and this is how you repay me? You think Mr. Greenfield would approve of you turning away his longest-serving worker in her time of need?" Michael's eyes narrowed. "Now you listen here, you senile old bat. Mr. Greenfield's got bigger problems than one washed-up farmhand whining for a handout. Why don't you run along and let the adults worry about business?" Trembling with rage and humiliation, Sarah turned on her heel. "This isn't over, Michael. I won't let you treat folks this way." Slamming the office door behind her, she blinked back bitter tears as she walked into the parking lot. Sarah, honey, what's wrong?" Margaret Davis, Sarah's former coworker and nearest neighbor, hurried over, concern etched on her lined face. Sarah collapsed into Margaret's arms, the dam of her emotions finally breaking. Through heaving sobs, she poured out the story of Michael's cruelty, the injustice of a lifetime of service tossed aside like yesterday's trash. Margaret listened, her own eyes misting over. "There now, let it all out. Then we'll get you home and check your blood pressure. Don't want you stroking out over that heartless bastard." Leaning on Margaret for support, Sarah made her way to Margaret's rusty pickup truck. They rode in silence through the dusty countryside, each lost in memories of better times. As they pulled up to Sarah's ramshackle house, a sleek black Mercedes sat idling in the driveway. Two men stood beside it, an older gentleman in a crisp business suit, and a younger man in well-worn jeans and a button-down shirt. The younger man locked eyes with Sarah, a slow smile of recognition spreading across his handsome face. "Aunt Sarah," he called, striding toward her. "It's me, Danny Greer. From the bus stop, remember?" Sarah stared in shock as the well-dressed man approached, his face triggering a flood of memories. The scared little boy from the bus stop, all grown up, tears welled in her eyes as she clasped his hands. "Danny, is it really you? What on earth are you doing here?" Danny grinned, pulling Sarah into a warm hug. "I made a promise, Aunt Sarah. Said I'd see you again, and I meant to keep it. Just took me a mite longer than I planned." He gestured to the older man. "This here's my daddy, Samuel. He's the one helped me track you down." Samuel stepped forward, removing his hat. "Mrs. Williams, it's an honor. Danny's told me what you did for him all those years ago. I can't thank you enough." Flustered, Sarah waved them inside. Come in. I'll put on some tea. You must be parched from your trip." As Sarah busied herself in the kitchen, Danny and Samuel looked around the small house. Signs of disrepair were everywhere. Peeling wallpaper, leaking ceilings, the musty smell of aged wood. They exchanged a concerned glance. Seated around the rickety dining table, steaming mugs in hand, Sarah apologized for the state of her home. "I'm sorry it's not much. Hard to keep things fixed on my salary, or lack of one lately." Danny leaned forward. "What do you mean, Aunt Sarah? Doesn't the farm help with repairs after all your years there?" Sarah barked a humorless laugh. "The farm? They ain't even paying us regular these days. It's every man for himself, just about." Samuel's brow furrowed. "That can't be legal, not paying earned wages. Something's not right here." He and Danny shared a long look. "Aunt Sarah," Danny said slowly, "Daddy and I were planning to stay in town for a couple days, visit some old friends. You think we could impose on your hospitality?" Sarah beamed. "Impose? Danny, you're welcome in my home any time. I've got a spare room, not much, but it's clean." As Sarah puttered around getting the room ready, Samuel pulled out his cell phone. "Son, I've got some calls to make. I have a hunch there's more to this farm situation than meets the eye." The next morning, Sarah was surprised to see a man in a hard hat walking around her property, scribbling on a clipboard. Danny was close behind. "Morning, Aunt Sarah. This is Joe Miller, best contractor in the county. I asked him to take a look, see what needs doing to get this place fixed up right." Sarah sputtered. Danny, I can't afford no contractor. I'm pinching pennies as it is. Danny laid a calming hand on her arm. Don't you worry about that. Daddy and I want to do this for you. Call it repaying a long overdue kindness. By the next day, Sarah's yard was swarming with workers. The buzz of saws and thump of hammers filled the air as repairs began in earnest. Sarah was on the porch, marveling at the hubbub, when a familiar truck came barreling down the driveway. Michael Torrance leaped out, face red with rage. Sarah, what the hell is all this? You got money to pay these strangers, but you're stiffing your own people. Samuel, who had been conferring with the foreman, strolled over. Mr. Torrance, is it? I'm Samuel Greer. I think you and I need to have a conversation about how a farm should treat the elderly folks who've given it a lifetime of service. With a firm hand on Michael's elbow, Samuel steered the sputtering manager toward his Mercedes. Sarah caught the words labor board and full audit before the car door slammed and the two men sped off toward Greenfield Farms' offices. Danny chuckled as he climbed the porch steps. I almost feel sorry for that Michael fella. Being on the wrong side of Daddy on a tear? That's not a place I'd want to be. He turned to Sarah, his face growing serious. Aunt Sarah, Daddy and I were hoping we could visit regular, make this a sort of second home. I ain't got no grandmas, and I don't like going to the house Mama's in these days. Would that be all right with you? Sarah felt a rush of warmth, a sense of family and belonging she had never known before. Blinking back tears, she pulled Danny into a fierce hug. Son, having you here would be a blessing and an answer to prayer. Funny how things come full circle. A little milk and pancakes, a bus ticket, and here we are. Danny smiled, his own eyes glistening. Just goes to show a bit of kindness can change a life. And you, Aunt Sarah, you're the best kind of person there is. You deserve to live well, surrounded by love. As Sarah looked around her transforming home, felt the affection of her newfound family, she knew her life would never be the same. A stranger's kindness, repaid tenfold. For the first time in years, Sarah's heart swelled with hope for the future.